We're in Memphis. Everybody realize we're in Memphis. And when I did those school programs, our first slide was, how did we get here? You know, when you think about how we got here, it's a simple real estate type phrase: location, 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 right? If you look at the whole globe in Memphis, whole globe of the world, Memphis is at the intersection of 35 and 90. Think about that, not streets or roads, but the 35th latitude, 90th longitude, they meet exactly right down here in Westwood area. That's 35 and 90 on the globe, okay? So that marks us right there as a good location. In North America, we're halfway between the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico. Think about halfway. Memphis is about halfway between those two great waterways there in North America, connected by the Mississippi River. In the Mid-South, Memphis is on the highest piece of ground on the Mississippi River between Cairo and Natchez, okay? See this high ground right here? See flat Arkansas over there? Used to flood 35 miles in that direction till they built the levees, all the way to Crowley's Ridge or Forest City, Arkansas. Maybe 2 or 3 feet deep or whatever, but it's still flooded enough to get in somebody's house and you couldn't develop there. Now with the levees, it's about 3 or 4 or 5 miles width right there. And then also in America, the first railroad to connect Atlantic Ocean with the Mississippi River came from Charleston to Memphis in 1857, right to downtown Memphis, about where the Wendy's is right now, Danny Thomas and Washington Avenue, okay? It had a little spur line that came down Adams Avenue to connect it to the river. A ferry across would get you to Hopefield, like that, about where the I-40 bridge is right now, and then the train would get back on after being ferried 5 cars at a time. It took 2 days to get a train across the river, 5 cars at a time before we built our bridges. Think about that, how important the bridges were. So we get across to the first time, that was like in transportation terms, like going to the moon. You're riding a horse and buggy across Appalachian Mountains or over the Tennessee River and all that area. Now you're riding a train, you're going 10 miles an hour doing this. And now you're riding a train about 50 miles an hour with all that capacity. That was like going to the moon at the time in transportation terms. That was a big deal right before the Civil War, okay? So let's go back to the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River drains 41% of continental North America. That's 31 states and 2 provinces of Canada, okay? So basically everything between the Rocky Mountains and the Smoky Mountains drains through here, about an average of 8 miles an hour. See it going down there? About 330,000 gallons a minute right now. A little bit higher than that right now because we're at, I think, 32 feet or so on the river gauge. We're up a little bit high, so it's a little bit faster. And every gallon of water has a teaspoon of mud. Now think about that stat. Look how brown that river is compared to that blue sky right there. So think about it. Over the centuries, the ooze coming down, laying out for centuries, making this basically the flattest place on earth through here. It's laid out through the delta. It drops 1 foot in elevation per mile as you go down through here. Okay, you know, New Orleans is like below sea level. You see what I mean? Back about 400 AD, there was an earthquake that created these 4 Chickasaw bluffs in West Tennessee. 60 miles north is Fort Pillow in Fulton, Tennessee. 40 miles north is Randolph. 20 miles north, Meeman Shelby Forest State Park. And this is the 4th Chickasaw bluff. This area here, basically from about the law school on Front and Madison all the way down to about to the lower bridges. They call that the 4th Chickasaw bluff. This is a big natural bluff here. You don't need levees over here because the water's never going to come up to here. You know, it's going to come up to Riverside Drive maybe, but not to here. It'll flood Arkansas before it floods right here. I mean, it'll flood Little Rock before it floods right here. As you look over at the river right now, you can see some water over across the bank lines over there. The Arkansas side floods about at 28 feet on the river gauge. So if you see we got up to 36 or 38 feet this year, that water over there will be about 10 feet deep for about a month or so, but it'll go down in about another 2 or 3 weeks. It'll go down and it'll start planting crops over there. It'll be good, rich alluvial soil for the farmlands. So now I mentioned we drain 41% of continental North America. So the Missouri River starts up there above Montana, the tributaries do, in Alberta and Saskatchewan. It flows down to St. Louis. The upper Mississippi starts up here in upper Minnesota, Lake Itasca. You know, it's so small you can basically walk across it up there. Right here, the Mississippi River is about 3/4 of a mile wide. Down here where the bridges are, it's about 1/2 a mile wide. That's why they built the bridges down there. Lake Itasca up there was discovered about, 300 years later after the Europeans actually discovered the Mississippi River here in 1541. 1541, Hernando, Desoto, the Spanish explorer, was wandering through here looking for the Pacific Ocean and gold, you know. Got to here, got to this high bluff in the spring, It was flooded. All he could see was water. He couldn't see any trees or anything. He thought he discovered the Pacific Ocean. They thought the Ohio River flowed into the Gulf of California. The earth was flat at the time, right, Leonard? The earth was flat at the time on the maps. There's no globes or anything. They were unexplored land. That's 1541. That's 79 years before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. Think about it. Europeans are here confronting Native Americans. Now, the Native Americans had come down centuries before that. Gosh, maybe 700 or 800 years before that. The nomadic tribes kept on coming down from the north, following the animal herds, following the seasons, getting to warmer climates. They were hunter-gatherers, and by the time they got to this area, the Delta, they found this soil here. They became fishers and gardeners, you know, and started planting beans and corn and could stay on these lands. And the men would go out in the fields, and the women would stay in the villages. And that's how communities got involved here, like Chucalissa. And you see the mounds over here at Hernando, Chickasaw Heritage Park. So we had a Native American community here till about the middle 16th century. The Europeans started coming in. 1541, like I say, is when Hernando Desoto came through here. 1739, we had our first French fort settlement up here, right on the South Bluffs, Fort Assumption down here. That's why you have the French Fort neighborhood name over there. That lasted about a summer. They didn't like the big mosquitoes or the humidity here in Memphis, apparently. And then you get to 1795 when the Spanish fort, Fort San Fernando, got formed down by the pyramid, which was called Auction Park. Now that was the area. It was Fort San Fernando. They lasted a year because in 1795, Spain signed a treaty that released all their rights east of the Mississippi and north of New Orleans. So Spain's out of here by 1795. They move across over here, across the river to Esperanza, or Hope, Fort of Hope. Hopefield is what the American name was, but Esperanza, because that's west of the Mississippi River. They had rights over there. In 1796, Fort Adams was formed in the old Spanish fort down there, one block east of the pyramid. Later, the name was changed to Fort Pike, and then to Fort Pickering. It was an old Spanish fort built in the floodplain. So the Spaniards just laughed at us for building into the floodplain again, you know, and you could see down into the fort. It wasn't like a really good, sturdy fort. It was kind of a ragtag fort. So they brought the Fort Pickering fort up here in the early 1800s to the high bluff. And then later on, that was Fort Pickering during the Civil War that established all through here. So that's how we got our first forts. 1803, the French come in, or the French sign a treaty with America, the Louisiana Purchase. So we about double the size of our country. So 1795, the Spanish are out of here. 1803, the French are out of here. That leaves us to the British and Great Britain in the War of 1812, which lasted 3 years, a very benign war. Lake Erie, Chesapeake Bay, New Orleans were the three major theaters of battles. 1815, January 1815, Andrew Jackson leads a group of Tennessee volunteers down into New Orleans to win the Battle of New Orleans after the treaty had already been signed in December. The word hadn't gotten back yet. And so now the British are out of here by 1815. That left the Native Americans. So Tennessee becomes a state in 1796. It's the third state to join the Union after the original 13 colonies. You had Vermont, Kentucky, then Tennessee after the 13. We're the first territory to become a state. We were North Carolina. North Carolina came all the way across, if you look at those boundary lines of North Carolina, to the Mississippi River. So we broke off in 1796. The first 22 years we're a state. All of West Tennessee is owned by the Chickasaw Nation. That's 21 counties now, west of the Tennessee River to the Mississippi River. 1818, Isaac Shelby, Andrew Jackson negotiate that land for 4.5 cents an acre. It's $330,000, 6.8 million acres. 20 annual payments of $15,000 each. Okay, and that's why Shelby County's named for Isaac Shelby, who was from Kentucky. And then the very next year, 1819, Memphis is laid out, basically from the Pyramid to Union Avenue, Wolf River to Danny Thomas, or where the Desoto Bayou is. About 1,300 acres, 362 lots. A pure real estate venture for three guys who lived in Nashville: Andrew Jackson, John Overton, and James Winchester. They never lived here. James Winchester gave us our name, Memphis, for the great Egyptian capital on the Nile River in the Delta setting there. Okay, and 1819, Memphis is born. Memphis is founded. Shelby County's founded that year. That's why this year, in 2019, we have the 200th celebration of the founding, not the incorporation, but the founding of both Memphis and Shelby County. And we just celebrated that partially. May 22nd was the day the first lot exchanged hands for considerations, not for money, but for considerations. Benjamin Foy was a Dutchman, F-O-O-Y. He was the first European to buy or be established to have property here. So now moving on a little bit further west about the Mississippi River, I mentioned it draining between the Rockies and the Smokies. Well, all that water coming from the Ohio River, about 2/3 of our water comes to the Ohio River. It's a lot drier on the western part of the country. And those tributaries start way up there in New York and Pennsylvania and western Virginia and western West Virginia. Remember the Tri-Cities? Pittsburgh's the Tri-Cities, not Tri-Cities, the Three Rivers. Johnson City, Kingsport, and Bristol's the Tri-Cities, isn't it? So as the Three Rivers come there and meet at Pittsburgh, and that all comes down to the tip of Illinois, and like I say, flows by here past New Orleans. No river flows from the Appalachian Mountains directly to the lower Mississippi River. The Tennessee and the Cumberland turn up and go up to Paducah and come back through here, all coming down here. The water here fluctuates annually 40 feet during the course of the year, most of the time at least 30, historically 60 feet. The all-time high was 48.7 feet on the river gauge. We'll talk about how we established that number. That was back in 1937. The second all-time high was just 8 years ago in 2011. Y'all remember that, 48.3 feet. The all-time low was in 1988 at minus 10.7 feet. The river was closed for 3 months to transportation. You know, you can see the bottom of the river almost. There are a lot of sandbars. In the fall of the year annually, there's more sand on the banks of the lower Mississippi River than there is on the coastline of the state of Florida. So in the springtime, when you're going down to, say, Helena, Arkansas, it's pretty much a straight shot because the water's up above all the sandbars and everything. But in the fall, when the water's down low, you're just going like this the whole time to get to Helena because you got to stay in the channel. We had a great flood in 1927. 50,000 people were displaced in this delta area, so Congress created the Flood Control Act in 1928 and started building the levees up and down the river. The largest project in the history of the Corps of Engineers, and by the 1937 flood, fewer people were displaced on higher water, and that was pretty remarkable at that time, all the efforts that had to happen, all the displacement due to all that. So that's what we do right now. Let's walk on up. Oh, we're here on the high bluff. So when we get down to our next section, we'll talk about how we developed from the cobblestones in the industry and the railroads and the factories and warehouses and everything up here. Now it's residential, isn't it? But great views up here. And the bluff, let's just talk about the River Bluff Walk just for a second. Let's move on away from the noise. We'll talk about that on the next stop down. Come on. Might be in the sunshine on the next stop. You can't get any better than this right here, though. And look at your views. We're going to walk about 2 blocks, and I'll talk again. Again, we're on the high bluffs right here. You can see the map that they put out about the whole riverfront here. This River Bluff Walk was actually established about 20 years ago, and it was controversial because the developers were just coming down. And of course, if you think about the whole history of the riverfront back in the 1960s when the old Holiday Inn Rivermont was built over here, which is now River Towers, Paul Kopic, a writer for the newspaper, got involved, and Holiday Inn and all the developers wanted to build right up to the end of the bluff, and he wanted public access around it, and he fought it, and that's how the name Kopic got put on Ashburn Park. That's why it's Ashburn Kopic Park. Ashburn was Q.T. Ashburn, who was a general with the federal barge lines, which is very instrumental in the barges coming into Memphis 100 years ago. Here comes a Walker. So, starting way back at the bridges down there, you can get access to along the riverfront by the Church of the River, by Channel 3, around that western side of the River Tower property. The walkway comes over Riverside Drive down into South Bluffs. Now, when South Bluffs was being developed, Mr. Turley and them said, well, we'll work with you. They negotiated back and forth, and you already had some of the houses built, so it went behind the houses, and then finally went all the way to like the state Supreme Court, and they ruled in favor of the Chickasaw Bluffs Conservancy, I think it was, or River Bluff Conservancy. River Bluff Conservancy, Tandy Gilliland, Pat Merrill, little old ladies in tennis shoes like the I-40 and Citizens of Reserve Overland Park, preserving the rights for public access. So they got the negotiation, they got this cut in, notched into the bluff here, very difficult, probably raised double the price of the walkway, And it comes back up to Vance Park here, goes all the way down almost to the pyramid. So it's about 2 miles long, I guess you would say. And just as you'll see today, people are walking, strolling, riding bikes, visiting, exercising up and down the steps. Leonard, you need to go back up and down those steps a little bit a few times here for this. So the River Bluff Walk is a very important part of the riverfront. Of course, now Riverside Drive came in 1935. Before that time, right here, there'd be steamboats or barges later on in the 20th century docked right up here against the bluff. And there'd be conveyor belts coming up to the warehouses up in here. Coal, cotton, things coming up and down just right here. Not over down at the cobblestones, even over here. Yeah, a bunch of steamboats at the cobblestones. Even when Riverside Drive was built in 1935, there were still conveyor belts going over it for a while. You'll see some of the old photos. And then, at this time, this part of Riverside Drive from Ashburn Coffee Park all the way down to Beale was right along the river's edge, okay? Up until the 1960s. In 1968, construction was started on the Hernando Desoto Bridge right here, or the I-40 Bridge, or the Big M Bridge, or the new bridge. It's 50 years old, but it's the new bridge, you know. Some people call it the Dolly Parton Bridge. I got to say that, you know. But you see where the old river channel used to come in from the northwest right there. That's the old channel. Used to come in and make a big loop like this. And like you see it around to the south, it goes around and heads back out to the west to Arkansas. Just a big U curve here. So when he built this bridge, you can imagine those barge tows in the 60s and 70s. A barge is 200 feet long. A barge tow might be 5 barges by 6 barges. It might be 1,000 feet long. And imagine coming through at an angle over there from the northwest. The big spans you see right here are 880 feet. So the big M is 1,760 feet. It's the longest freestanding letter of the alphabet in the world right there. It's 1,760 feet long. But you can imagine coming at an angle with the current and the wind blowing you, try to navigate through and then curve and not run into the land here. So what happened during that time, Mud Island used to come all the way out about halfway to the river here. The Wolf River came all the way down to here. In the 1960s, they cut it and sent it out just north of Mud Island, Greenbelt Park. You see the two white domes up there. That's where the Wolf River comes out now. And the Loosahatchee River used to come all the way down to here too. That drains into the Mississippi River north of Fraser. So they dredged all that up. They took the western half of Mud Island, put it up on the top of the eastern half of Mud Island, okay, to get it above the 100-year floodplain. Because you see the lower portion of Mud Island right now, it's underwater. It's at 22 feet on the river gauge right now, so it's 6 feet underwater. You can't even see it right now. Well, that was the basic level of Mud Island the whole time. And it flooded every year. Back in the 1920s and 30s, Boss Crump said it ought to be beautified or dynamited because it's so ugly. When the water would go down in the summertime, you have all these trash trees and driftwood logs and debris and refrigerators and whatever out there floating in the river. But build up, and it's just an ugly sight on the riverfront. They tried to dynamite it, it wouldn't go away. So again, during the bridge construction from 68 to 73, they took the western half, put it up on the eastern half, about 2 miles up. So see that downriver barge tow can get a straight shot coming through the uprights. They don't have to turn at all. And then when they get down to the lower bridges, they got to navigate to get through the 3 lower bridges because the current will run you right into Economy Boat Store or Valero Refinery. So it's a real difficult maneuver here. So having changed the way the river kind of came in and softly went around in a big loop, now all that current's coming right into Riverside Drive and these bluffs. And you can remember in the 70s and 80s when the water would come up, we had a sandbag Riverside Drive. It was sagging down, it'd get water on it and sometimes flood. It was a lot lower at the time. So a project in 1990 through 1991, what they did is one of the best public project in the history of the city of Memphis, I say. It was by the Corps of Engineers. They stabilized it. 7 good things happened in this project, okay? They stabilized the channel. What they did, they put a rock dike out here, big old rock dike you'll see on the other side of the land there, and then started putting dredge fill in and filled in and added 20 extra acres of land right here to stabilize this. So they stabilized the channel, stabilized Riverside Drive, stabilized this bluff right here so you could insure the bluff, so you could finance the bluff, so you could build on the bluff, and you got 20 extra acres of park land. That's 7 good things happen in one public project right there. And look how we're fussing about that project right now. You know, yeah, it was done at a time when there was one big population downtown. It's just a flat, pretty, boring park. It's a greensward. just like the greensward in Overland Park. It's necessary. It gets used all the time, more than Memphis in May, but that's politics. But that's happened in 1991. Gosh, that was 20 years ago almost, you see. And now you see walkways and parking and exercise trails, volleyball court. You see the Tom Lee sculpture. Now originally, Tom Lee Park was 8 acres right about the Bill Street Landing area. So this expanded it to 30 acres. It was named for Tom Lee back on May 25th, or May 8th, 1925. The steamer S.E. Norman, a Corps of Engineer boat, was inspecting the levees here in the high water time of the year, about 10 miles south of here, and it capsized with 72 people on it. Tom Lee was an African-American riverboat worker who could not swim, and he had a 24-foot John boat. He would just deliver somebody down to Helena in that little John boat, 70 miles down to Helena. That's not too easy. He's coming back upriver. He sees the people in distress. He individually pulls 32 people, saves their lives by himself, and he could not swim. So he was declared a hero. I guess he was a hero for doing that. They gave him a house in Memphis. They gave him a job in Memphis, sanitation department, but they gave him a job in Memphis. And he went to the White House. And in 1954, Tom Lee Park was named for him. There was an obelisk put here in 2006 on down in the middle of the park. There is a sculpture that was done by David Allen Clark that shows Tom Lee in his boat reaching out to somebody holding on to wood. A more depictive sculpture of his heroic feats rather than an obelisk. Okay, that's on down in the park. That's how Tom Lee Park gets its name, Tom Lee. Okay, so now the river comes in. That water, again, the channel did not change when they did this cut. The channel still goes up that way. I mean, the channel did change, the state boundary line did not change. So the state boundary line goes up that way. So when you're over on the other side of the bridge right there, standing in Greenbelt Park on Mud Island, looking across the water, you're looking into Tennessee. There's many times, you know, the river used to do this. We formed our state boundary lines based on what was called the Talweg, Willie, T-A-L-W-E-G. That's the lowest part of the river is the Talweg. So that's where the actual line that separates people's, you know, not the banks, it's the Talweg in any creek. And so that did not change. So when they started, you know, in the 1930s project, they cut off 170 miles of river because it was doing this, and they made some straight shots, you see. Up there in New Madrid, Missouri, you ever been to New Madrid, Missouri, or you see up there in the Boot Hill, where that big curve goes 19 miles, and you go a half a mile across land. You go 19 miles to go a half a mile. But they didn't want to circumvent New Madrid or the grain elevators or the power plant. And they need to slow the river down some too. If they get it going too fast, it's going to drain too much. You know, you got to look at the habitat here, the whole floodplains and the drainage, the environment and everything when they start doing that. So they want to get to go too fast and drain too fast and be too powerful. And then during the high water, it's really coming down. When we had that high water in 2011, the water was coming down to about 900,000 gallons a minute, about 15 miles an hour. And it was out of its bank. It tore a big hole into President's Island down there, not the industrial part, but the lower part when you look on the maps of that. So it came back down and got back in the banks about 2 weeks later. But you let that river going too much. You cannot control the Mississippi River. You can only accommodate her is what they say. A lot of names of the Mississippi River: Old Man River, the Big Muddy, the Mighty Mississippi. Mark Twain called it the Great Sewer. You know, if you throw a cigarette butt down in Wrigley Field in Chicago, it'll go through the storm drain system and eventually come by Memphis, Tennessee. I've seen shopping carts and cars and chickens out here on the river. We've had chickens blow across the Mud Island from Arkansas in big winds and storms and stuff, you know. A lot of dust comes over this way. So that's kind of the story of the Mississippi River in this area. You go back to the Civil War real quick. When that railroad came in here, if you look at the Civil War in the Mississippi River, the Union strategy was get control of the western rivers. That's the Tennessee, the Cumberland, and the Mississippi rivers in this part of the country. Memphis being a big port with the cobblestones. We'll talk about the cobblestones in a minute, but we had the cobblestone wharf here then for the steamboats to come in, a good hard wharf. We had the train coming in, so we're a big transportation center. So you had to control the troop and supply movements. So the Union fleet comes down from the north, Confederate fleet comes up from the south, and on June 6, 1862, they meet right out in this area here. And 5,000 citizens sat on the banks of the Mississippi River and watched the Naval Battle of Memphis like they're watching an NFL football game or a fireworks show from Memphis in May. They're just shooting at each other in the river. Okay, they're not shooting on land. There's no land approaches at all. The battle lasts 90 minutes. 7 of the 8 Confederate boats get destroyed. There's 8 Confederate boats and 18 guns, and about 18 Union gunboats and about 80 guns. There's really like a triple mismatch. So it didn't take very long. at 90 minutes. It was the largest inland naval battle in the history of the world. Think about that, occurred right here in Memphis, Tennessee, and 5,000 people watched it, you know. Memphis was quickly a northern occupied town, a very strategic town for the North during the Civil War, which we don't talk about too much here. General Sherman planned march to the sea from here. General Grant planned part of the Battle of Vicksburg from the Hunt Field and home. Here, still stands in Memphis, Tennessee. We housed over 5,000 wounded Union soldiers during this time in 10 buildings in downtown Memphis, warehouses, hotels, places like that. Business was so good. Not a single building was burned in Memphis during the Civil War. There was no land battles here, you see, like in Atlanta or Oxford or Richmond. We're basically untouched. We're under martial law, tough martial law, but the infrastructure was saved. Business was so good north and south that First National Bank actually opened here in 1864 in the middle of the Civil War. The 14th oldest bank charter in America. That's First Tennessee Bank now. That was a pretty good decision, you see. That's how Memphis was in the Civil War. A very northern occupied town. It was a sanctuary city. Before we had that term, it was a sanctuary city because of free slaves or runaway slaves came to Memphis here, to Fort Pickering, got on the auspices of the Union forces here. But U.S. colored troops formed here, very instrumental for the Union occupation and the advancement from this end. Cutting the Anaconda Plan is what it was. They came around the eastern coast, around Florida, came back up to Mississippi like a snake and tried to wrap around, cut off all the troop and supply movement. Woo! And then the South couldn't get any more supplies in, and then started going across and closed in down in Alabama in the South. So that's kind of the Civil War aspects right there about the river. Some of the major events on the river. Of course, Memphis in May, since 1977, it was formed. It's had celebrations down here on the river, Sunset Symphony, fireworks show, barbecue cooking contest, Beale Street Music Festival. Used to have the 4th of July celebration down here. So it's a place where the people have all come together. You won't find any better sunsets in America than right here. Everything on that Arkansas side will be forever farmland, floodplain. You won't have a high rise right now. Now I understand in a couple of years there might be a 20-story building over at Southland Greyhound Park. You might be able to see it. When you get on the roof of the Peabody Hotel, which is 13 stories high, you can kind of see some of the rooftops of West Memphis or some of the towers, water towers or stuff like that. It's not like a bunch of tall buildings in West Memphis, but it's going to be forever flat and beautiful sunset here, unmatched in the country, I would say, probably, when you think about it. Let's go on down. The next stop will be Vance Park. So we're going to walk briskly to Vance Park. If you want to get up here and governor, it's like when you go on the interstate and there's a cop car up in front of you on the interstate, you're not going to pass it, right? You think I'll pass you? Okay. I'll walk backwards then, okay? You see this sculpture here called Whirl. Our Urban Art Commission about 20 years ago got formed because there just wasn't enough urban art in downtown Memphis. Of course, you go back to the 1970s, there's more people living in jail in downtown Memphis than living residentially. Mud Island wasn't open yet. Beale Street was fenced off. Orpheum Theater was bought for $285,000. The Rame Hotel, Civil Rights Museum wasn't open. You know, Peabody was closed. Just think about the times. And so it emptied out in the 70s and 80s and we slowly renewed. But like here's a plaque right here. It says The World. Who did it? John Medney-Wolf, 2001. So that's one of our older ones here. And Urban Art Commission is like a 1% set aside of all the public projects. Gets dedicated to a fund, plus other sponsors for urban art projects you'll see all over downtown, like by the Convention Center or the quilt surround by the City Hall, my favorite one there. You see the Memphis City Beautiful sign, that's from the Tennessee Historical Commission. The silver signs with the 3 stars at the top are Tennessee Historical Commission. The green signs are the Shelby County Historical Commission, the historical markers. But you can see in 1930, Memphis City Beautiful became the nation's first beautification commission. Mr. Crump helped do that. And one of their first big projects was in 1935, the beautification of Riverside Drive, planting dogwood trees and crepe myrtles. In fact, there's a marker down in the ground way down here, very small marker about this big that mentions the dogwood tree trail or something down in old Riverside Drive. Of course, Riverside Drive got in, like I say, 1990s, expanded and elevated. But Memphis City Beautiful is a very integral part of our city. We used to be the cleanest city, if you remember all that back in the, we're not doing good right now. I'd say that, but we can do better. What
was that slogan? Habit or rabbit or something like that?
That's way before my time, man. Okay, but there's historical markers along the riverfront here. Right down below us, you'll see people looking at them down there. What happened every year during Memphis in May? These markers are out in Tomley Park, and they're always getting relocated during Memphis in May because the staging or all the scaffolding and stuff. So what I did is, let's put them all in one spot outside the footprint of Memphis in May, and they won't ever be moved again. So you have the little one on the left is the Tocqueville marker. The Tocqueville came through here in like the 18th century and categorized what was going on in this part of the country. And C-SPAN put a plaque down there in the 1990s for it. Little old weird plaque. The next one is about the water route of the Trail of Tears. You've heard of the Trail of Tears, the land routes. One went up to Illinois, one came down Highway 64, Stage Road, down Austin P. Jackson, crossed right back where the pyramid is. We're putting a land route marker over there in Greenbelt Park this November. That's going to go up. But this is the water route. Now, the water route of the Trail of Tears in 1838, about 3,000 Native Americans were put on barges like in Chattanooga and barged up to Paducah, back down the Ohio River, lower Mississippi, past Memphis to the Arkansas River to Fort Coffee, Oklahoma. About 3,000 came through on the water route, Trail of Tears. 2014, we dedicated that, had the Choctaw Nation here. I helped dedicate it. I was the only English-speaking person in the whole deal. They're doing all these chants and everything, and we did a riverboat ride with him. And Graydon Swisher, give him credit with the Trail Association here. He's the one that does that. And then the next one is James Hyder, Old Man River, the African-American insurance salesman who had a hard time being the 1950s and 60s and 70s an African-American insurance salesman in Memphis. But he had a great baritone voice, and he helped unify the city with his Old Man River. He actually changed the lyrics to the song to make it a little bit more politically correct at the time, too, if you think about the way he sang it. You take the high note, I'll take the low note, all the encores and everything just can't be repeated. It's a song they won't sing anymore, but a black man was able to unify the city. A black man who had hard times. I got to go visit him when he was in his last days and talk to him about things. He was a friend of mine. You probably knew James Hyder. And then the fourth one is John James Audubon. He came through for one day, apparently in the 1820s. Now that's when you come to the point here, the Mississippi Flyway. There's a Pacific Flyway, a Central Flyway, a Mississippi Flyway, and an Atlantic Flyway. The migration of annually migrate waterfowl going down from the Arctic down to South America. Well, the Mississippi Flyway, 70% of the migratory waterfowl in this country come down the Mississippi Flyway through the center of our country. That's 300 species of birds, okay, or waterfowl, let's say. So that's why over here, that's why James Audubon is out there snapping pictures of birds, you know, John James Audubon. He was only here for one day, apparently, but he's got a whole historical marker for it, you know. Go figure, one day. Tennessee Historical, that's the 4 marker. That's kind of my monument row right there. So I'm doing the same thing up at Crump Park with some other markers, getting them all put in one spot so they'll never have to be moved again because of some event or construction or whatever. Over here, 80 miles to our west is Stuttgart, Arkansas. You know what that is, the World Championship duck calling contest every year, like 80 years now. 60 miles to our east is the National Bird Dog Museum in Grand Junction, Tennessee, the 120 years of field trials there. When I tell Europeans we got a museum for bird dogs, they go, that's not culture. In this part of the country, that's culture. Yeah, 120 years for sure. Ducks Unlimited Worldwide Headquarters are in Shelby Farms Park. Think about that. And of course, that makes sense to have a duck over here in the pyramid, you know, and what's going on with their museum in the pyramid and Bass Pro all over there. So Memphis is right in the center. Memphis has always been the center of everything in the Mid-South and the Delta for about a 150-mile stretch. It's the northern capital of Mississippi for sure. But you think about it, it was the business, the government, the retail, the shipping, the social, the music. Anybody could come together on Beale Street in times of segregation. Whites could go to Beale Street, blacks could go to Main Street. But all them white kids wanted to go down and see what's going on with that music, didn't they, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that jazz that became rock and roll and soul out of you know, Beale Street at the turn of the century last was a mile of vice, commercial ambition, owned by the Jews, policed by the whites, and enjoyed by the Negroes. And that's Lieutenant George W. Lee's quote about it. He was the mayor of Beale Street during that time, a political operative in the middle of the century. And it was strong. And just recently we dedicated a historical marker for the Lung Kong Ten Ye Association. You know, back in my quickie thing here in the 19th century, the late 1880s or so, the Chinese had come to America, helped build the railroads, and then the Irish and Italian come in and run them out. It's the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. If you're not born here, you can't come back. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm kind of close, I know. This is touching on the fringe here, but the short story is the Lung Kong 10-year Association was over on 3rd Street, now B.B. King, and later on Vance, and it helped assimilate Chinese into the Delta that couldn't go back to the homeland. The culture, the language, the counting money, the rituals, funerals, all sorts of help, assimilation. Chinese could go where whites couldn't go or where blacks couldn't go. That's why I see a lot of Chinese presence in the Delta, in the grocery stores, the restaurants, the laundries, the black neighborhoods in Memphis, etc. I remember Chinese folks and congregations I was involved with in the 1970s. Still know some folks to this day. Saw Lauren Jew yesterday. Anyway, so that was over here. So Beale Street was a real melting pot. From 1900 to 1910, less than 10% of the people that lived in Memphis were actually born in Memphis. Because after the yellow fever epidemic, everybody had left. In the 1870s, what the Civil War couldn't do to Memphis, the mosquito did. We went down to 10,000 people and then gradually rebuilt up to 100,000 in 1900 through immigration from the Delta and in-migration from Europe. You see, Irish, Italian, German, Jewish, a big melting pot in this whole Delta. So that's why you see all this melting pot here. It's just been that way for a century now. We still haven't learned to live together yet, I don't think so, in many ways. But many ways we have. I'm not saying it's hopeless or anything. Again, here's the river right here. It's still brown. Look at all them swirls in the river right there. All them eddies is what those are called. And it's not a friendly river at all. We tried to water ski on it. It's no fun. Jet skiers love it because it's rough. You know, the big boats can take it and get up to the sandbars and camp out and picnic and play volleyball on the sandbars. You don't do cane pole fishing off of boats here in the Mississippi River. There's 95 species of fish in the river, by the way. I've seen catfish over 100 pounds come out of there. Them guys, getting them out of their boats and they're pulling the boats up, they'll pick that catfish up and try to pick it up like this. You ever pick up 100 pounds like this? They're breaking their back trying to brag about their big fish they got, you know. But it's there's fishing contests that start in Memphis, and they'll take those big boats down to Louisiana and make it back in time to weigh in on some of these fishing contests that Bass Pro have. So it's a very lively river as far as nature and animals, flora and fauna, whatever you want to call it. And yes, the agriculture here is just amazing. When you think about, but right between Memphis and Little Rock right now, 45% of the rice crop in America grows in Arkansas. Rice and Rice is like the #1 producer of rice in the world. You got all them chickens over there with Tyson Foods. You got Walmart, the biggest grocer in the world, out of Arkansas. Down in Mississippi, everybody thinks cotton, cotton, cotton. You know, between 1880 and 1920, 70% of the cotton crop in America is within 200 miles of Memphis. And it had to come up to Memphis to get taken on boats down to New Orleans, around Florida, back up to Charleston to get to England. 40% of the cotton being milled in England during that time, and we're just taking to Liverpool and Manchester, was coming out of Memphis, you see. But you put that train in here, it can go straight across to get to Charleston to get over there too. There were over 400 sawmills here during the 19th century. So we're the hardwood capital of the world, the cotton capital of the world. You know, now the cotton's moved on out to the southwest to India and China. Hardwood's still around. These prevailing hardwood, bottomland hardwood forests are still here, being managed, being harvested. If you go out to the Pickwick area, right there where Pickwick Dam is, in a space of about 4 hours, you'll see about 50 lumber trucks coming through there. It's just amazing what's being forested timber-wise in West Tennessee that you don't see here at all in here. You don't see all the cotton bales coming up here anymore like you used to see on Front Street. This is the high bluff. What can I say? The train line right there. Used to be 3 train tracks. Going back down into this area here, before we had the interstates and the airport and all that moved to the southeast of our city, this is where the trucks came in, the trains came into these warehouses here from the river. This was the industrial part of Memphis. The barge industry comes in. One barge has the same capacity as 15 train cars or 58 semi-trucks. So a standard barge tow of 30 barges, that's about 450 cars on a train that you're stopped out there at Perkins and Poplar counting. You know, usually that's about 150 or 200. And that's 1,800 different trucks and drivers and tanks of gas on the highway. So the economy of the river is important. What moves up and down here, the vast economy is so much bigger. Coal, grain, it's dry products. It's products that don't have to get to the market real fast. Petroleum, fuels, it goes to the factories and the warehouses, then gets transported out by the trucks and trains that way, you see. So the economy of the river moves slow, very slow. It's about 10 miles an hour going downriver. It's about 5 miles an hour going upriver. The best knowledgeable comparison there is you go from Memphis to New Madrid. We used to take boats to New Madrid when I ran the Memphis Queen Line down here. And it's 120 miles by land, okay? It's 2 hours by land up, 2 hours by land down. Same, right? Well, it's 188 miles by river. It's 28 hours going upriver. It's 14 hours going downriver. Think of what the land difference with the interstate and everything makes, or Highway 51. So that kind of shows you a comparison. And you go from Memphis to Cincinnati. If you get on a barge tow here and you go 24 hours a day straight, you do that. You work 6 hours on, 6 hours off, 6 hours on, 6 hours off. You don't ever stop. Keep on going. It takes 5 days to get to Cincinnati by land. Going 24 hours straight. You got to go through locks and dams too. By car, it's probably 10 or 12 hours, depending on how many times you got to stop to go to the restroom or how many tanks of gas you need, all that. You know, so it just shows you the economy of the river is slow, but it's big, it's bulky. It pays off per capacity a lot better than all the other fuel costs you think about and manpower costs with trains and trucks and airplanes. We said location, location, location. Well, here we say river, railways, roadways, runways. We're the #2 inland port on the Mississippi River. We're one of 3 cities to have all 5 Class 1 freight rail operators in it. We're a big freight rail town getting bigger. We're I-40 right here and I-55 crossing West Memphis. That's the 3rd largest center of trucking activity in America. It's a big truck stop over here in West Memphis. You've been there. West Memphis incorporated in 1927 by Highway 70 that came from San Diego to New York City. That's why it got formed. Marion's the county seat, you see, in Crittenden County. It's way older than West Memphis. We think West Memphis is the big city. Well, gosh, Marion's almost as big as West Memphis now when you think of population. And then our airport's #1 cargo airport for the last 35 years. And so river, railways, roadways, runway. Transportation, distribution, logistics is our #1 employer in Memphis. Hospitals and healthcare is #2. And then hospitality and tourism is #3. Restaurants, attractions, all those businesses, hotels. Now in 2012, we restarted the overnight passenger vessel business from New Orleans and St. Louis and Cincinnati and Minneapolis, the American Queen Steamboat Company. We had 1 boat that year. Now there's 5 vessels coming from 2 companies, about 25,000 people coming in and out of Memphis annually. That's about a $42 million annual economic impact, just off those 5 boats coming in. So tourism's new money is clean money. That convention center expansion right now or improvements is about $200 million, but it's not coming out of local taxpayers' dollars. It's coming out of the dollars of, you know, when you go to another city and you pay for a room, oh, it's going to be $89. I'll take that room. You know, by the time you check out, it's $134 with all the taxes, the airport fee, the rental car fee, the arena fee, and all this. That's how FedEx Forward's being funded and some other things, you know, out of some of these taxes on our tourists. You see, so think about tourism as being a very positive impact on our community. It's new, clean money coming in. It's not us folks deciding, are we going to go to the Pink Palace this week or the zoo this week and displacing our money. It's brand new money. They want it, it's burning holes in their pocket to get out of it to get in here. And the river's a big part of that. The local riverboat company, the Memphis Queen Line, Memphis Riverboats now, we'll talk about them in a minute. They've been in business since 1955, okay? Let's walk down to the bulletin board here, okay? You got a key?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, come on. This is a bulletin board, or this is the river gauge in Memphis, okay? It doesn't mean it's the depth of the river, okay? It's just a gauge. And how did we come about this gauge? Well, apparently, steamboating got so big in the 19th century, through the middle of the 19th century, up past the Civil War. This hard cobblestone warfare became a big steamboat center in Memphis with the railroad track and everything. No bridges yet. So the Corps of Engineers, or the federal government told every city, because again, the river changes courses so much. It makes sandbars and shoals. When you get down to the low water time of the year, you will look over that Arkansas bank and you'll see these rock dikes that come out. When it gets like to 15 feet in the river gauge here or below, you see those rock dikes come out several hundred yards on that Arkansas side. And you'll see that on both sides of the river during low water. And what it does, it just automatically slows down the water on that side, and that 1 gallon of mud, that siltation kind of goes slower, so it drops and it fills in over there. And on the Tennessee side, they don't have the rock dikes, so the water current continues faster and it will scour itself and keep it scoured out. And then in the low water time of the year, the dredge will come through and they'll do soundings before that time. When they bring the dredge up, they'll dredge out these portions that have built up during the course of the year. So every year a dredge comes up. Right here in front of Beale Street Landing, there's a big eddy. You can see where that tree is right there. You can see how that water's kind of swirling around right there. If you go down to the water's edge down there, about 100 feet out from the bank, that water's flowing north back into the old Wolf River there. It's filling up the Wolf River Basin right there at a very high current right now. It's very subtle, but you can see how it kind of turns and coming in right here. So those eddies play a lot that with the river. They build up shoals underneath the water's level. So what they did in 1872, they told every city up and down the river, Memphis is on a high bluff, Osceola's down low, Helena's down low, you see. As you go, you got different relations from the high bluffs and the lower lands. They told every city that year, take your low water mark that year and make it 0 on your local gauge. Just arbitrarily that year, your lowest water, whether it's in April or August or October, that's going to be 0 on your local gauge. And we'll measure your local gauge forever and ever from that time. So that time, when they measured here, it was 183.9 feet. Got it down to the 10th of a foot. You know, the river that fluctuates 40 feet during the course of the year, you see. And you can see when you come back here in August or so, when that river's way down low, that cobblestone slope is a 6-to-1 slope. You'll see over 1 million cobblestones over there. Right now you'll see about 100,000 because the water's up covering them. You see, for every 1 foot the water rises in the river, it goes 6 feet up that diagonal slope as you come up, you see. So they had to just get a measurement that everybody knew. All the captains, all the mariners, all the pilots on the river kind of knew if Memphis was at 10 feet, that was pretty low. When you look at the charts, if it's at 40 feet, it's pretty high. And same thing with all the twists and turns at certain levels. You can go right over those sandbars because your boat's only taking 8 or 10 feet of water, you see. You get up in the 30-foot range, you can go straight down the Mississippi River rather than making all these wild turns. So basically 184 feet sea level is where 0 is. So you add 31 to that, that means it's 215 sea level right now, okay? Up there by the law school at Front and Madison on the 0 mile marker that's there on the back side, I think it says 272 feet sea level. Again, that's 60 feet higher than where the water is right now to get up to there. Can you imagine 60 feet of water going 30 miles in this direction? When back in 2011, when it was at 48 feet, it was about some places 8 to 10 miles wide coming down here, you know, at depths that just knocking trees over and all sorts of force to it. It's like a big drill bit. So what we do, this is an old-fashioned bulletin board. I think dates back about 80 or 90 years, back to the 1930s, when they did all those flood control measures in the Flood Control Act of 1928. And it was manually changed all those years, up to about 3 or 4 years ago. I was down at Beale Street Landing, and I kept on noticing in April it was 18 feet and falling. R means rising. On the back side here, there's an F. That means falling. See how simple we are on the river? So I kept on, and now I knew I was looking in the newspaper because they have on the back page, the weather page, they have the 3-day forecast and the river levels for other cities like New Madrid, Carruthersville and all that. And it was like up in the 30s. So I called the Corps of Engineers and say, hey, why aren't y'all changing the sign anymore? Well, number one, you know, when we got all the electronics now and cell phones and satellite technology, you go into a pilot house of a towboat or a riverboat here, it's like looking in breaking news and seeing all those, and the breaking weather and seeing all those screens they got. I mean, they got 2 or 3 computer screens right there on their pilot house wheel. And they don't have some big wheel they're turning. They're doing some little joystick or something, you know. And they got satellite technology now that tells you the depth of the river. They can go 50 miles in each direction and tell you what boats are coming in your direction, how fast they're going, when they're going to pass you. They can tell you the weather forecast coming in, the rain, whatever, the winds. And they used to be, up until about 20 years ago, they'd come into a city like Memphis, they'd be looking for the bulletin board to see what the river gauge was, or calling somebody on a radio before we had all the cell phones, you know? Think about that. They were calling on marine radios, keeping in contact. So this is an antiquated, out-of-date way of doing it. And the Corps of Engineers said, well, the guy wanted too much money to do it anymore. And I said, I'll do it for free. Give me the keys. Because I was right down there. Give me another set of keys I needed to have. Here they are, 2 keys. Actually, it was 1 key at the time. And so I started changing it about 4 years ago. So today we're officially going to announce that Robert Montgomery is going to start changing the bulletin board here. Come on up, Robert. He's had some practice already. Let's see how good he is. He has his own set of keys, too. Robert Montgomery works for the Downtown Memphis Commission, Blue Space Brigade. He's agreed to take this on. So we're going to 32 feet. So you can get a 5-day forecast on the internet. Corps of Engineers will send you an email that shows you the 5-day forecast. So it doesn't change every day. It could be 32 feet, 32.1, 32.3, 32.7, then 33. You change it on the foot. We don't have the decimal point here, you see. We do have space to where we can put minus on here too. We get down to -8, you can put a minus sign. We have a minus sign here. So what you gonna do today?
I'm gonna take it up from 31 to 32.
All right. Now watch how he does this. Watch the subtleness in his wrist here, the flow, the bend of the knees, if you push from the bottom here, it pushes a lot smoother. You get caught. Oh, you're getting caught up there, aren't you? You're getting caught on. Oh,
He's got the pin.
take the pin out. Take the lock off and take the pin out. Sorry, I just unlocked it. All right, see, that pushes out. Sorry about that. He pushes it out. And now we're so smart sometimes. Woo! We put the 2 on the other side. So we got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in here. In this little bank right here, which I had to lock up. So he slides it back in. Boom. R, we'll lock it back up. Sometimes you go from 29 to 30, you got to change both. Sometimes you go from R to F, you know. Sometimes it's so windy up here you can't do it, or it's raining, you don't want to do it. I've been blown off here a couple times. That was a kite. I just threw that thing and dove. I didn't want to get death by bulletin board, you know. So we're going, because it's a historical thing, we know of one other one of these gauges up in Wycliffe, Kentucky. Anybody knows where Wycliffe is? It's above Hickman. There's apparently one up there, according to the Corps of Engineer maps, there, you know. So does it have to be done? No. Should it be done because it's here, it's historical? And I guarantee you, half the time I come up here, there are people coming by. I've been jogging by Hyder for 10 years and I've never seen anybody change that sign. It's always changed. Well, it's changed when you come down here and change it in weird times of the day or night. It doesn't matter. People do notice it. It's a fun thing. It's a historical thing. We're hopefully this summer going to get it painted and get a little sign put right here, an interpretive sign right here to tell that story I just told about what it is, what it means. It is not the depth of the river. Now, if you look at the river out there at the bridge, you're coming from the Arkansas side, it's pretty flat about halfway out, and then the channel's cut on the Tennessee side, so that's how it kind of comes, whoop, and back up like this. If you look at the maps, that's how it'll show the river bed. So right now, it's 31. It's probably about 40 feet deep on the Arkansas side. On the Tennessee side over here, it's probably about 65 or 70 feet deep. And then you'll see the numbers on the bridge. The numbers on the bridge like 65, 60, 55, 50, 45, 40. That's telling the mariners coming through, that's what you got for clearance. You know, the American Queen, when it has its smokestacks up, it's 99 feet high. They can cantilever those smokestacks down or hydraulically lift them down to make them only 55 feet high to clear these bridges. Sometimes they get caught between bridges because they're too high. The water's risen on them, or they release water from a locking dam and it's risen on them or something like that. So you got to be careful. Sometimes the boats can get stuck. The steamboats can, not the barge tows. They're not too high. They can get stuck by low water, not high water. So Robert's officially done this. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you very much. Robert, he's got his own set of keys. I got my own set. I'm not going to fool with him anymore. I've kept a chart on every time I've done an Excel spreadsheet. I might ought to send that to you. And he'll be the one keeping up the bulletin board. And this is a great teaching tool right here. When we have school groups up here, Colonial, we have school groups up here, you pick out your student who needs the attention the most, we'll bring him up here and let him change this thing right here, you see. He gets all the glory in the world. He's the coolest guy ever, you know. But it's a great teaching tool to stand here and look at this river. This is a great focal spot right here. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jimmy.
All righty, let's go. Let's lock that one up. Hey, look at these wonderful benches you're sitting on. Notice the legs are gar. See how the legs are gar? And right here on the crossbar, you got the word Memphis. Right here. These were designed by Jim Wallace of the National Ornamental Metal Museum. Okay? So all these benches you see up and down the Memphis riverfront are these gar leg benches. The gar being one of the nastiest fish in the river, you know. Have many been to the National Ornamental Metal Museum? Where's the next closest metal museum? Japan. If you think about that, it's a very special place over there. When you go to those grounds over there, see the metallurgy. The work they do, the events, the weddings, the blues on the bluff, all that. It's just a great place over there. We can kind of see the three lower bridges. It kind of looks like one bridge from here. And maybe in July or August, we'll do a tour on the south end with the parks down there, Chickasaw Heritage Park, Crump Park, the mounds, the bridges in that area in July or August. I'm going to come back. But just real quickly, there's three bridges down there. The first bridge is the center bridge, the middle bridge, opened in 1892 as the Great Bridge, is now we call it the Frisco Bridge. It was a single line railroad bridge. It was the first metal structure across the lower Mississippi River in our history. It was the longest still span in the country at the time. The first bridge across the upper Mississippi was the Eads Bridge, E-A-D-S, in St. Louis, like in 1873. And of course, all the river people fought the bridges because they had to get them up a certain height so the steamboats could get underneath them. You know, so that was a big deal too. That's why they're up so high, because of the fluctuation of the water. That was a big deal right there. So it opens, they had to test it before they opened it. They didn't trust what they had done. They had started at both ends and hope it met in the middle when you look at the pictures. And so they took 18 locomotives and got volunteers to drive the locomotives to the bridge they wouldn't insure or inspect or approve. It didn't fall down. And on May 12th, 1892, the Frisco Bridge opened. That's what opened up Memphis to the West Coast and the Asian markets. Like I said, it took 2 days to get a train across the river, 5 cars at a time by ferry right here. Now you're getting a whole 150, 200 consist train across in 5 minutes. Boom. We're still in, you know, basically automobiles aren't here yet. In 1904, we had 8 automobiles in Memphis. The speed limit was 8 miles an hour. By 1910, we had 1,000 automobiles. By 1913, 6,000. By 1920, 19,000. By 1930, 52,000. Post-World War II, it went crazy. So we're getting automobiles. So we had to build a second bridge, which is the northernmost bridge, the Harahan Bridge. 2 railroad lines and cantilever supports on each side for the automobile traffic going back and forth. They opened in 1917. The train portion opened in 1916. James Harahan was an executive for the Illinois Central Railroad. He saw the vision, but in 1911, he got killed in a train wreck. In fact, he's buried down here in Forest Hill Cemetery. Kind of curiously, the engine driving that train for IC at the time was engine number 382. Have you ever heard of engine number 382? It's the same engine that Casey Jones drove to his death in Vaughn, Mississippi. It was in 9 different train wrecks before they decommissioned engine 382. I think I would not get behind the wheel of that one. But James Harahan was named for him, opened in 1916 and 17. And then again, after World War II, we had so many cars, we had to take those old cantilever supports, decommission them. The third bridge opened, the Memphis and Arkansas Bridge, as you know, is the old bridge now. Okay, that's I-55 now and Highway 70. Highway 70 had come from San Diego in 1927, the Broadway of America. That's why we have Broadway Street over in West Memphis. In a lot of little towns, Highway 70 becomes Broadway in them because the Broadway of America Association was teaching people how to drive across the country in cars. Our grandparents learned how to drive across the country in cars. Here's a sign that says 70. And in 50 miles, there'll be another sign that says 70. In 50 miles, there'll be another sign that says 70. And trust us, in 2 days, you'll be in San Diego. They didn't have GPS or map. I mean, it wasn't all coordinated at that time. We were having to do that just 90 years ago. Here comes a train. Now, this track isn't used. Much. He has to blow that horn at every intersection too, so. Kind of like Elmwood, huh? Now he's cheating. He got sneaking 4 cars up this way because they had a 99-year lease that expired in the 1980s, and I was over at Mud Island at the time. We almost put the train station in the Mud Island parking garage. Dick Hackett wanted to do that, but we eventually got the old train station renovated, and Amtrak still goes down there. But that lease ran out, and since it would be, if you had all those freight trains coming up and down these lines with all the residential right in here, this going 24 hours a day, so they make a route around through the belt line, except for the one train a day, the City of New Orleans, the Arlo Guthrie train, riding on the City of New Orleans, you know. From Chicago, New Orleans, comes by at 7 o'clock in the morning, gets you to French Quarter at 3:30, comes by at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, gets you to Chicago by 10:30 the next morning. It's a great ride. I encourage anybody to do that. You see Americana that way, just like the pioneers did. But it still runs, riding on the City of New Orleans, right here. And that's a great, and the trolley track is on the inside line. It's just not gonna be open again for about another year is what I understand, with all the troubles with getting new cars bought and refurbished and all that. So about another year. It was down for about 3 years because of the fires and everything. The harbor here, Wolf River used to come into here. You see the local riverboat company down here. President's Island got established in the 1950s, Jack Carley Causeway. The Mississippi River used to go around both sides. That was an island. So they closed off the eastern part of the Mississippi River so you could drive over to it, raise that level. It's about 20% of that island has the industrial on it. 80% of it's a floodplain and has deer and raccoons and turkey and all this stuff over there. Turkeys like named Leonard or stuff like that, I think, you know. But that's all. The industrial port moved down there in the 1950s away from this harbor because the barge industry, you just didn't have the capacity here with the river level going up and down the Slackwater Lake to switch the barges like they needed to from those 30 barge tows. So everything went that way, kind of dried up the harbor. Wolf River starts 108 miles east of here in Holly Springs National Forest in Mississippi. It comes through 2 states, 4 counties, 11 communities to get here now. It used to come all the way down to here, but in the 1950s and 60s, it was so polluted by the industries in North Memphis, the smell was coming down here, they cut it and sent it straight into the Mississippi River. And Lucihatsi went straight in too, and that's when they built the bridge, raised up Mud Island. So this is backwater for about a mile here, coming from the Mississippi River and coming from the storm drains of Memphis. Lick Creek, Overton Park drains to Lick Creek, that drains to the Wolf River, that drains to the Mississippi River, you see. And all these bayous coming north of Poplar drain into here. The Queen Line, now Memphis Riverboats, 1955 they opened up. Tom Meanley bought it in 1962, started building boats in his backyard. The Island Queen, the Memphis Queen 3 were built in 3 years, back in the 70s and 80s from scratch by the family and the crew. The hulls in Whitehaven towed up to here. They finished the decks out here. It's a family-owned company for 3 generations. There's about 600 cruises now. Annually, sightseeing cruise, dinner cruises, weddings, parties, primes, school field trips. If you want to get a local riverboat ride on the Mississippi River between New Orleans and St. Louis, there's only one spot anymore. No Vicksburg, no Natchez, no Cape Girardeau in Memphis. That's 1,300 miles of river. You only get it in Memphis. Mile 736 right here on the river. So that's pretty special right here. And a lot of Europeans and Australians come here to take that riverboat ride, to go into the Delta, to get this Memphis culture, this Delta culture, the Civil War, the civil rights, the music, the authors, the food, more than barbecue. People love Americana. That's what it is in the river. But there's only one river in America. That's the lower Mississippi River. It's got 250 tributaries of all shapes and sizes and kinds, but only one river in America when you look at tourism terms. Lower Mississippi River is fantastic. Right here we also have Autozone Headquarters. It started in Memphis 1979 as Auto Shack. Got sued by Radio Shack for the name infringement, so they changed the name to Autozone. Now there's 6,000 AutoZones and no Radio Shacks. Thank you very much. You see the flagpoles over here. It used to be we could fly flags in Memphis, but we can't anymore. We have one flag flying, that's the United States flag, but the 7 flags that used to fly there are the 7 flags of jurisdiction over this area since 1541, beginning with Spain, 1670s France, 1760s Great Britain, 1782 United States and North Carolina, 1796 Tennessee, 1861, 1862 Confederate States of America. There are your 7 flags of jurisdiction. I don't think the Choctaws or the Cherokees or the Chickasaws ever had a flag. They had a nation, obviously, here for 1,000 years before the white man or the black man was here. But the Native Americans were here, and there's a very solid community throughout the Delta with the Native American tribes here. 19 different tribes. You go down to the Chickasaw Heritage Park, you'll see the legacy statue there that was done by Vinnie Bagwell in 2013 of a Native American woman. And on her shawl it has the names of the 19 villages in this area. Plus a representation of a blues man, of a conquistador. It represents the African American heritage, Native American heritage, and Hispanic American heritage in this area. Legacies right there in Chickasaw Heritage Park by the mounds. Okay. Mud Island opened 1982. The 18-gallery Mississippi River Museum, 35,000 square feet, about 3,500 artifacts of all kinds. The walk bridge still going over there. There's the bridge. Bridge of Lights we have the Bridge of Lights, and now we got Mighty Lights. Big River Crossing opened 3 years ago, folks, in October 2016. We hope to dedicate a historical marker. We're approving that text today for Big River Crossing and Harahan Bridge. We'll dedicate that in October there. The longest pedestrian walkway in the country over the Mississippi River. Yes, sir.
I do walk the Big River Crossing.
Slowly, I'm sure. It's a great view, panoramic view of the delta, of the city skyline. You're looking north, you're 80 feet above those barge tows. Normally, we're 500 to 1,000 feet away from these barge tows. You get on that bridge, you're right down on top of them. It's pretty neat to be right on top of them like that, I think. We're going to wrap up here right now. We're going to start at 1 o'clock again at the Cotton Museum and walk Cotton Road for about an hour. Okay? Is that okay with everybody? It's okay with you?